married woman is walking down the street in her neighborhood and she sees her brother. "Where are you going?" he asks. "To the mikvah," she replied. His heart stopped. His cheeks turned red. His jaw drops. "You do remember," she says to him, "I volunteer at the mikvah." He sighs a sigh of relief. Would you share the surprise of the brother in this story if you learned in casual conversation about someone's mikvah attendance? Why or why not? And where do we see the approach to be private about mikvah attendance in Jewish halachic sources? Are there any exceptions? Are there times when we can or even should tell someone that we're going to the mikvah? Perhaps you've found yourself struggling to explain to a parent or child or friend, where are you going on a quiet weeknight or during a family Shabbat meal or during the Pesach Seder? And especially in a month of lockdown when many of us weren't going anywhere else. Where are you going? The Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserlis, writes in Yoreh Deah Kuf Tzadichet Memchet that a woman should be private about her mikvah night. And he says the following: there are those who wrote that a woman should be private on the night she goes to the mikvah. And so women are used to concealing the night of their mikvah to not go in a loud fashion or in front of people so that people will not sense where they are going. According to the Ramah, not only should women not shout it from the rooftops, but they also don't want people to infer or figure out where they're going. There's an obvious connection between it being her mikvah night and the fact that many couples are intimate on that night. The sense of privacy when it comes to matters of intimacy is praiseworthy. In Bamidbar Kaf Dalet Hey, we read Ma Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov. Bilam, in trying to curse Bnei Israel, ends up praising them. And he says, how goodly are the tents of Jacob. And Rashi says on this, what he's praising them for is that the openings of their tents were not facing each other because they had a sense of keeping their intimate matters private and in their own family. Ramah's intention is not to tell people unnecessarily when it's your mikvah night. Of course, if there's a need, it's allowed. It can't be totally forbidden that other people should know you're going to the mikvah. The mikvah attendant sees you, other women might see you in the waiting room. So it can't be completely forbidden. Sometimes women will ask, I'll be away for Shabbat. What do I do? I'm not allowed to tell anyone that it's my mikvah night. But how am I going to arrange to go? In truth, you can tell someone if it's going to make it easier to arrange the logistics. Sometimes telling one person makes it easier to figure out a way that everyone else doesn't find out. Sometimes people need to also arrange a ride or a walking partner to get to and from the mikveh safely. And of course, that safety is of utmost concern as well. Yet, generally speaking, etiquette around the mikvah means that you know when you have a conversation with someone in the waiting room, they're not going to be telling someone else where they saw you and what you spoke about. And when you leave the mikvah, you're going to hopefully not see people standing outside waiting for whoever's in the mikvah. But sometimes it can get complicated. Have you ever seen through a friend's cover-up when she's trying to tell you a story but not tell you that it happened at the mikvah? Or have you had trouble when you had to explain to someone other than your spouse where you were going to be that night? Actually, we're allowed to tell a white lie if that can help us keep our privacy around our mikvah night. In Shmot Kaf Gimel Zayin, we learn to stay far away from lying. Midvar sheker tirchak. Stay far away from lies, from false claims. That seems to imply we should never tell a lie. But perhaps here is one time where there's an exception made. We see major exceptions given in the Talmud to this rule. One is in Masechet Yevamot Daf Samech Hey Amud Bet. It was taught in the name of Rabbi Shimon. Mutar lo la'adam lishanot bifnei hashalom. It is permissible for a person to change something, to lie essentially, to tell a small lie, in order to maintain the peace. And Rabbi Natan responds and says, Mitzvah. It's even a mitzvah to do so. It's a good thing, a positive thing to lie in a case where it would preserve shalom. And we know that shalom bayit, of course, is an important type of peace. Likewise, in Bava Metzia, Kaf Gimel Amid Bet, we are taught, Rabbi Yehuda teaches in the name of Shmuel, that in 3 ways the rabbis would deviate from the truth. And they would tell a white lie in the following 3 areas. In regards to their Masechet, how much they learned, in regards to their Puraya, their bed, and in regards to their Ushpiza, their guests. Rashi teaches us that in regards to Bipuraya, if you would be asked, did you sleep with your spouse? You would say no, and this would be a trait of modesty. Sometimes in my role as a yoetzet halakha, the question of privacy and mikvah comes up. Someone might say, I have to leave my house at 7 o'clock to go to the mikvah, but I never leave at that time anymore. I can't say that I'm going to a meeting. I can't say that I'm going to an event at shul. So what do? My teenage daughter is going to notice, and she's just so curious. So some women might appreciate to brainstorm in that moment and think about how to get out of that tricky situation. It's always very case specific, and sometimes we can come up with a creative idea together. In fact, if you want to share in the chat a time when you came up with a good excuse or got out of a tricky situation, maybe it can help someone else. Feel free. But I actually want to take a step back now. The value of tzniut is so important for maintaining the sanctity of a couple's relationship and their intimate life, of course. But are there any other values that we're perhaps overlooking when we say, keep it private except for a time when you absolutely need, and then you tell someone? What are we missing out on? Here's one thought. How are we going to pass on the crucial mitzvah of taharat hamishpacha and mikvah observance if we're always hiding from our sons and daughters that we go to the mikvah? How will the next generation know about mikvah observance if they don't know that their mothers go? We'll be maintaining the tzniut around the mitzvah, but will we be maintaining the mitzvah itself? While the Ramah's dispensation tells us we shouldn't let other people know or sense when we're going to the mikvah, he doesn't say that we should hide in general, that we keep the mitzvah of taharat hamishpacha and that we attend the mikvah. And this could be a really important thing to speak to our children about. I know with my own children, I've used the opportunity of doing tevilat kelim together when we tovel dishes together, as an opportunity to say, do you know when else a mikvah is used? And at an age-appropriate level, to start talking about this. Something else to consider as a possible negative ramification of being overly private about mikvah is that it sometimes gives the impression that there's a connection between mikvah and shame and secrecy, perhaps, which is maybe a step further than privacy. As a community, we want to feel proud of our mikvaot, thankful of our mikvah attendance, proud of the women who attend, and we want everyone to know you're not alone. You're not the only one keeping this mitzvah. It's hard to balance that when we talk so much about privacy and go to such efforts to make sure no one knows where we're going on that night. And if an aspect of mikvah is challenging, or if the mikvah attendance is bringing up another challenge in her marriage or in her personal life or in her health, it's an opportunity to bring it up. And we don't want the shame that a person might feel, hopefully not, but might feel around the fact that mikvah is often considered such a private thing to lead to an embarrassment about asking that question and getting the help and support when needed. Thankfully, these types of conversations about mikvah and so many related topics are happening in communities all over the world, including through this very exciting conference. And it's an opportunity to celebrate our mikvah observance for those for whom mikvah is relevant. And it's an opportunity to think about the role that mikvah and what it stands for can play in our communities generally. It's an opportunity to find companionship with those who are going through the same challenges that we are. And hopefully, if the idea of privacy has in the past led you to shy away from asking questions, now is the chance to ask them. We shouldn't confuse the beautiful aspect of tzniut around mikvah observance that we see in our mikvaot and we see in the way that women conduct themselves for the idea that we should be secret or shameful about our mikvah attendance. There's so much to be proud of.